The Galactic Concord had ruled the spiral arm for 12,000 years, and in all that time, they had never faced a threat like this one. 17 species made up the Concord, bound together by ancient treaties and shared fear of the darkness between stars. They had built an empire that stretched across 10,000 worlds, and they believed themselves invincible. They were wrong. High Arbiter Theseus stood at the center of the War Council chamber, his insectoid body trembling with barely contained fear. Around him sat the military commanders of 16 species, each one representing billions of lives, and each one wearing the same expression of dread. The Vecthory Dominion had come. 3 frontier worlds had already fallen to the invaders. Billions of citizens had been slaughtered or enslaved, and the enemy showed no signs of stopping. Their massive war fleets moved through Concord space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. "We have 18 months," Theseus announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. 18 months before the Vecthory reached the core worlds. "And we have no way to stop them." The commanders shifted in their seats, none willing to meet the Arbiter's compound eyes. They had tried everything: orbital bombardments, drone swarms, automated kill systems, and nothing had worked. The Vecthory simply absorbed their losses and kept coming. Commander Rethvan of the Scythery hegemony rose from his seat, his 4 compound eyes scanning the chamber. The Scythery were the greatest military strategists in the Concord, their battle algorithms legendary. But even he had no answers. "Our projections show complete collapse within 2 cycles, he said, his mandibles clicking with each word. "The enemy outnumbers us 3-1, and they fight with a savagery we cannot match." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. It was then that the doors opened. 3 figures entered the room, and every head turned to watch them. They were small compared to most Concord species, standing barely 2 meters tall, with soft skin and no natural armor. They wore dark uniforms decorated with strange symbols, and they walked with a confidence that seemed almost absurd given their fragile appearance. Seminus felt a ripple of irritation pass through him. He had nearly forgotten that the humans had been invited. Their species had only achieved spaceflight 2 centuries ago, and their fleet numbered less than 200 vessels. What could they possibly contribute to this war? The lead human was a female with gray hair and sharp eyes. She carried herself like a warrior, though Theseus could not imagine what threat such a creature could pose. Behind her walked 2 males, one young and eager, the other older and covered in strange scars. "Admiral Chun of the United Earth Navy," the female announced, her voice calm and steady. "Thank you for allowing us to attend." Theseus gestured dismissively with one chitinous limb. There were more important matters to discuss than entertaining primitives. "You are welcome to observe," he said, "though I doubt your species can offer much assistance. This is a war for civilizations, not newcomers." Several commanders chuckled at this, and Theseus saw the younger human male clench his fists. But Admiral Chun simply smiled, a strange expression that showed her teeth. "With respect, High Arbiter, we did not come to observe." The chamber fell silent again. Admiral Chun stepped forward, her boots clicking against the polished floor. She looked around at the assembled commanders, studying each one with those unsettling eyes. "I have a question for the council," she said. "How many ground troops can the Concord commit to the defense of Yalto 7? "Ground troops." The word sent a wave of confusion through the chamber. Commander Rethvan made a sound like crackling static, the Scythery equivalent of laughter. "Ground troops are obsolete," he said. "Modern warfare is conducted from orbit. Only barbarians still send soldiers to die in the dirt. The Vecthory send soldiers." Admiral Chun replied. The laughter stopped. She was right, of course. The Vecthory were known for their ground assaults, their endless waves of shock troops that overwhelmed planetary defenses through sheer numbers. It was one of the reasons they were so difficult to stop. "That is precisely the problem," Theseus said. The Vectri field billions of ground soldiers. We cannot match those numbers, and we have no experience in such primitive warfare. Admiral Chun nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer. Then perhaps, she said, it is time you learned what an Earth Marine is. The scarred human male stepped forward, and something in his eyes made Theseus pause. This one had seen battle, real battle, the kind that left marks on the soul. I am Colonel Marcus Webb of the United Earth Marine Corps, he said, his voice rough like grinding stone, and I am here to offer you a solution. He activated a device on his wrist, and a holographic display sprang to life above the council table. Data began scrolling across the projection. Numbers and images that meant nothing to Theseus. Earth is what your scientists classify as a Class 12 death world. Webb continued. Extreme temperatures, high gravity, constant seismic activity, and an atmosphere filled with microbial life that wages biological warfare on everything it touches. Some of the commanders leaned forward, suddenly interested. Death worlds were rare, and the species that evolved on them were often dangerous. Humans did not reach the top of our food chain through strength or speed. Webb said, we are not the strongest creatures on our planet, not the fastest, not the most venomous. We survived because we refused to die. He gestured at the holographic display, and images began appearing, images of Earth, of its deserts and jungles, its mountains and oceans, and the countless predators that lurked in every shadow. We evolved alongside creatures that could tear us apart with a single blow, Webb said, and we learned to fight back. We developed tools, tactics, and most importantly, we developed spite. Spite. Theseus asked, unfamiliar with the word. Colonel Webb smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Spite, he repeated. The desire to hurt your enemy even when you cannot win. The willingness to suffer just to make them suffer more. It is a human trait that has no translation in your languages. Admiral Chun stepped forward again, standing beside her colonel. The Concorde has forgotten how to fight on the ground, she said. You have relied on technology for so long that you have lost the warrior spirit. But humanity has been at war since the day we climbed down from the trees. She looked directly at Theseus, and he felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. We know how to stop the Vectri, she said, and we are willing to show you. Theseus stared at the two humans for a long moment. They were small and fragile and impossibly confident, and he could not decide if they were brave or simply insane. Very well, he said finally. Show us what an Earth Marine can do. Admiral Chun nodded, and her smile widened. With pleasure, High Arbiter. Colonel Webb stood at the center of the War Council chamber, surrounded by the most powerful military minds in the galaxy, and he felt completely at ease. He had faced worse odds before. The holographic display hummed softly as he prepared his presentation, and the assembled commanders watched with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Most of them still believed that humans were primitives, soft creatures from a backwater world who had no place in this world. They were about to learn otherwise. Before I show you our combat data, Webb began, I need to explain what makes human soldiers different from anything you have ever encountered. Commander Rethvan clicked his mandibles impatiently. The Sithari were not known for their patience, and he clearly believed this briefing was a waste of time. Every species believes its warriors are exceptional. Rethvan said, we have heard such boasts before. What makes your soldiers so special? Webb nodded slowly, as if he had expected the question. I understand your skepticism, Commander. So let me start with some basic facts about my species. He gestured at the display, and an image of Earth appeared, a blue and green sphere wrapped in swirling white clouds. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Webb said, our planet experiences earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, floods, and droughts. The temperature can swing from burning hot to freezing cold within a single cycle. Some of the commanders shifted in their seats. They knew about death worlds in theory, but few had ever met a species that had actually survived one. But the planet itself was not our greatest enemy, Webb continued. That honor belongs to the other creatures that lived there. The display changed, showing images of Earth's predators, lions and tigers, crocodiles and sharks, bears and wolves. Creatures designed by nature to hunt and kill. These are some of the animals that preyed on our ancestors, Webb said. They are faster than us, stronger than us, and equipped with natural weapons we could never match. By all logic, humans should have been driven to extinction millions of years ago. The Fulnorian delegate leaned forward, her azure face twisted in confusion. The Fulnorians were brilliant mathematicians, and she was clearly running calculations in her head. How did your species survive? She asked. Webb smiled grimly. We learned to fight dirty. He changed the display again, showing images of early humans, small and fragile compared to the beasts around them, but holding crude weapons in their hands. Our ancestors could not outrun a predator, Webb said. So they learned to track it for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We call this persistence predation, and it is a hunting technique unique to humans. Several commanders made sounds of disbelief. The idea of chasing prey until it died from tiredness seemed absurd. Humans can walk and run for longer than any other creature on our planet, Webb explained. Our bodies are designed to shed heat efficiently, and our minds are built to ignore pain and fatigue. A human hunter can pursue prey for 50 kilometers without stopping. He let that sink in for a moment, but endurance alone was not enough. We also developed something far more dangerous: intelligence combined with aggression. The display showed more images now, tracing human history from stone tools to bronze weapons to steel swords. The commanders watched as humans advanced from caves to castles to cities, always fighting, always killing. My species has been at war with itself for our entire recorded history, Webb said. We have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other. We have developed weapons and tactics and strategies that no other species has ever imagined. He paused, looking around the chamber, and then we took all of that knowledge and created the Marine Corps. The display changed to show human soldiers in their combat armor, standing in formation with weapons at the ready. They looked small compared to most Concord species, but there was something in their posture that suggested danger. The United Earth Marine Corps is the oldest military institution in human history, Webb said. Our traditions go back over 500 years, to a time when humans still fought with primitive chemical-propelled weapons. We have been refined by countless wars, shaped by victory and defeat, until we became something unique. He looked directly at Commander Rethvon. We are not just soldiers, Commander. We are predators who have learned to think. Rethvan's mandibles stopped clicking. A Marine is trained to fight in any environment, Webb continued. From frozen mountains to burning deserts, from dense jungles to open oceans. We learn to survive on minimal supplies, to improvise weapons from anything available, and to keep fighting long after any rational creature would surrender. Admiral Chun spoke up from her position near the wall. What Colonel Webb is not telling you is that Marine training has a failure rate of over 40%. Nearly half of all candidates are unable to complete the process, not because they lack physical ability, but because they lack the mental strength to continue, the Vela sage, ancient and withered, stirred in her floating chair. Her species was older than the Concord itself, and she rarely spoke during council meetings. You are describing soldiers trained for ground combat, she said, a voice like wind through dead leaves. But the Vectory field millions of such soldiers. How can a few thousand humans make a difference? Webb nodded respectfully toward the sage. An excellent question, Elder, and one that brings me to the heart of this briefing. He changed the display one more time. and rows of numbers appeared, statistics and ratios that meant nothing to most of the commanders. These are the combat records of the United Earth Marine Corps, Webb said. Verified data from every engagement we have fought since achieving spaceflight. The Fulmorian mathematician leaned forward, her eyes scanning the numbers rapidly. Her azure skin began to pale. There must be an error in the translation software, she said. These figures cannot be correct. They are correct, Webb replied. Other commanders began studying the data now, and similar expressions of disbelief spread across their alien faces. Some whispered to each other in their native languages, and even Rethvon had gone completely still. High Arbiter Theseus raised one chitinous limb for silence. His compound eyes were fixed on the display, and his voice was barely above a whisper. Colonel Webb, he said slowly, what is the kill ratio of an Earth Marine? The chamber went silent. Webb stood motionless for a long moment, letting the tension build. He had waited his entire career for this moment, for the chance to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of in sustained ground combat against a numerically superior force. He said, the average Marine rifleman maintains a kill ratio between 15-1 and 20-1. No one moved, no one spoke. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. And for the first time since the Vecthory invasion began, the War Council understood what fear truly meant. Not the fear of being conquered, the fear of what humanity might do if unleashed. The silence in the War Council chamber stretched on for what felt like an eternity. High Arbiter Theseus stood frozen at his podium, his compound eyes locked on the holographic display that still showed those impossible numbers. Around him, the commanders of 16 species sat in stunned disbelief, trying to process what they had just heard. 15-1, 20-1. The Felnorian mathematician was the first to speak, her voice shaking as she ran the calculations in her head. If these numbers are accurate, she said, then a force of 10,000 human soldiers could theoretically eliminate over 150,000 enemy combatants. Those are the conservative estimates, Colonel Webb replied calmly. Our special operations units average 50-1. Commander Rethvon made a sound that his translator could not interpret. The Sithri were considered the finest warriors in the Concord, and their elite soldiers rarely achieved ratios above 5-1. This is impossible, the Krolnathi delegate gurgled, his aquatic body rippling with agitation. No species can achieve such efficiency in combat. You must be falsifying your records. Admiral Chun stepped forward, her expression unchanged. The Krolnathi have perfect memory, she said. Search your historical archives. You will find that humans have been fighting wars since before we developed writing. We have more experience in ground combat than every species in this chamber combined. The Krolnathi delegate fell silent. His people did have perfect memory, and he knew that the human admiral was telling the truth. Webb changed the holographic display, and new data appeared, images and records from human history. Battles fought across centuries of constant warfare. Let me give you some specific examples, he said. During a conflict called the Second World War, a single human soldier named Simo Haiha killed over 500 enemy combatants in less than 100 days. He did this using a primitive rifle in sub-zero temperatures. While enemy forces specifically hunted him, the commanders stared at the image of the old soldier, a small man with a weathered face and calm eyes. During another conflict called the Vietnam War, human soldiers fought in dense jungle terrain for over a decade. Despite being outnumbered and far from home, they maintained consistent kill ratios above 10-1. Webb paused, letting the information sink in. And during the Titan insurrection, just 40 years ago, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez held a defensive position for 7 days against a force of over 2,000 enemy combatants. When she was finally extracted, she had confirmed 347 kills. He showed them the image of Vasquez, a muscular woman with dark skin and fierce eyes, standing in front of a pile of destroyed combat drones. She was extracted with 2 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and severe blood loss, Webb continued. When the medics asked her how she felt, she smiled and asked when she could go back. The Vela sage stirred in her floating chair, her ancient eyes studying the human colonel with new interest. "You speak of individual warriors," she said, "but individual heroics do not win wars. How do your soldiers perform as a unit?" "An excellent question, Elder." Webb changed the display again, showing tactical formations and battle recordings. Human soldiers are trained to operate both independently and as a coordinated force, he explained. A Marine fire team of 4 soldiers can hold a position against 50 enemies. A Marine squad of 13 can assault and capture an enemy stronghold defended by over 100. He showed them recordings of Marines in action, moving with precise coordination, covering each other, advancing through enemy fire with mechanical efficiency. "We train our soldiers to think," Webb said, "not just to follow orders, but to adapt and improvise when situations change. A Marine whose commander falls will immediately assume leadership. A Marine whose weapon fails will find another way to kill." The Rethkini delegate, a massive reptilian creature known for his species' love of combat, leaned forward with sudden interest. "You speak of adaptation," he rumbled. "But what happens when your soldiers face overwhelming odds? When there is no possibility of victory?" Webb smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "That is when we become truly dangerous." He changed the display one more time, showing a single word that his translator rendered differently for each species. "Present SPITE. Humans have a psychological trait that does not exist in any other known species," Webb said. "When we are wounded, cornered, and facing certain death, we do not surrender. We do not retreat. Instead, we become more aggressive, more violent, more determined to make our enemies suffer." Admiral Chun spoke up, her voice cold. "We call it fighting out of spite," she said. "The desire to hurt your enemy even when you cannot win. The willingness to endure any pain just to take one more of them with you." The Rethkini delegate's eyes widened. His species understood aggression, but this was something different. Something almost insane. "During Earth's history," Webb continued, "human soldiers have charged into certain death rather than surrender. They have crashed burning vehicles into enemy positions. They have detonated explosives while surrounded, killing themselves and dozens of enemies. They have fought with bare hands and teeth when all weapons were exhausted." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each commander. "The Vectri believe they are predators," he said. "They believe that overwhelming numbers and savage aggression will break any enemy. But they have never faced a species that refuses to be prey." The Vela sage made a sound that her translator rendered as thoughtful humming. "You are describing madness," she said. "No rational creature would behave in such a way. You are correct, Elder," Admiral Chun replied. "And that is precisely why we win. The Vectri fight with calculation and strategy. They expect their enemies to behave rationally, to retreat when outmatched, to surrender when defeated." She paused, her eyes hard. "Humans do not fight rationally. We fight with everything we have, down to the last breath, down to the last drop of blood. And when we have nothing left to fight with, we find a way to make our deaths cost the enemy dearly." High Arbiter Theseus had been silent throughout this exchange, his mind struggling to accept what he was hearing. These humans were not just warriors. They were something else entirely, something that did not fit into any category the Concord had ever created. "You are asking us to believe," he said slowly, "that your species is uniquely suited for the kind of warfare the Vectri wage." "I am not asking you to believe anything," Webb replied. "I am showing you data. I am showing you records. I am showing you the truth." He deactivated the holographic display and stood at attention. His scarred face calm. "The Concorde has forgotten how to fight on the ground," he said. "You have relied on technology and orbital superiority for so long that you have lost the warrior instinct. But humanity has never forgotten." Admiral Chun stepped forward to stand beside her colonel. "We know how to stop the Vectory," she said, "and we are prepared to prove it." Theseus looked at the two humans for a long moment, and for the first time since the invasion began, he felt something that might have been hope, or perhaps it was fear. He could no longer tell the difference. High Arbiter Theseus called for a recess, and the War Council chamber erupted into chaos. Commanders shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. Some demanded that the humans be dismissed as liars, while others studied the combat data with growing unease. The Felnorian mathematician had not moved from her seat, her azure fingers still tracing calculations in the air. The humans waited patiently near the chamber doors. Admiral Chun standing with her hands clasped behind her back, and Colonel Webb watching the alien commanders with an unreadable expression. "This is madness," Commander Rethvon declared, his mandibles clicking furiously. "We cannot base our strategy on the claims of primitives. They have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries, and yet their data appears to be genuine," the Krelnathi delegate replied, his aquatic body still rippling with agitation. "My people have analyzed their historical records. They are not falsified." The Rethkini delegate slammed one massive fist against the table, cracking its polished surface. "Why does it matter if their soldiers are skilled?" he roared, the Vectory number in the billions. "Even if every human marine kills 100 enemies, they will still be overwhelmed." The debate continued for nearly 3 hours, arguments flying back and forth across the chamber while the humans watched in silence. Finally, Theseus raised his limbs and called for order. "We will convene a private session," he announced. "Senior commanders only. The human delegation will wait outside." Admiral Chun nodded respectfully and led her officers out of the chamber. As the massive doors closed behind them, the young human lieutenant finally spoke. "Do you think they will agree, Admiral?" Chen's expression did not change. "They have no choice," she said, "and they know it." Inside the chamber, Theseus gathered the most experienced military minds in the Concorde. The Velith sage floated silently at the edge of the group, her ancient eyes watching everything. "We must discuss this calmly," Theseus began. "The humans have presented their case. Now we must decide whether to accept their assistance." "Their assistance?" Rethvan spat. "They are offering to sacrifice a few thousand soldiers against a force of millions. This is not assistance. This is suicide." "Perhaps," the Velith sage whispered, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "But perhaps that is precisely what we need." Every commander turned to look at the ancient being. The sage rarely spoke in council meetings, and when she did, her words carried weight. "Explain yourself." "Elder," Theseus requested. The sage's form shifted in her floating chair, her withered body barely visible beneath layers of ceremonial robes. "We do not need the humans to win this war," she said. "Our fleets are damaged but not destroyed. Our production capacity remains largely intact. Given time, we could rebuild and counterattack. Time is precisely what we do not have." Rethvan interrupted. "Correct," the sage agreed. "We do not have time because we cannot slow the Vectory advance. Their ground forces sweep across our worlds faster than we can evacuate them. We win in orbit, but we lose on the surface." She paused, her ancient eyes moving to the door where the humans had exited. "But if someone could slow them down," she continued, "if someone could hold them on a single world long enough for our forces to regroup, then we would have our time." Theseus finished, understanding dawning in his compound eyes. The sage nodded slowly. "The humans are not offering to win the war for us," she said. They are offering to buy us the time we need to win it ourselves. And in exchange, they want a seat at this table." Commander Rethvon's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You believe their soldiers can actually hold against the Vecthory?" he asked. "I believe they are willing to die trying," the sage replied. "And according to their data, they will take many enemies with them when they fall." The debate continued, but the tone had shifted. The commanders were no longer arguing about whether the human claims were true, but about whether to accept their offer finally. Theseus called for a vote. The motion passed by a narrow margin. The chamber doors opened, and Admiral Chun walked back inside with her officers. Her expression remained calm, but there was a glint of anticipation in her eyes. "The Council has reached a decision," Theseus announced. "We are prepared to hear your full proposal." Chun nodded and stepped forward. "Earth will deploy the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force to Yalto 7, she said. 12,000 combat personnel with full support equipment. We will hold the planet's capital city against the Vecthory invasion force, while Concord fleets regroup and prepare a counteroffensive." Rethvon's mandibles clicked sharply. "Intelligence estimates the Vecthory will send at least 2 million soldiers to Yalto 7, he said. "You would pit 12,000 against 2 million. "Yes," Chun replied simply. "That is not a battle," the Rethkini delegate rumbled. "That is a massacre." "Yes," Chun agreed. "But not the massacre you are imagining." She pulled up a holographic display showing the city they intended to defend of Fadasha. Sprawling urban center with millions of buildings, countless choke points, and terrain that would favor defenders. "Urban warfare is humanity's specialty," she explained. "Every building becomes a fortress. Every street becomes a kill zone. The Vecthory will have to pay for every meter in blood. And by the time they reach the center of the city, their invasion force will be gutted." Colonel Webb stepped forward, his scarred face hard. "The 3rd MEF includes our finest combat engineers," he said. "Within 2 weeks of landing, we will have turned that city into a death trap. Mines, ambush positions, overlapping fields of fire, and fallback points that lead to more kill zones. And in exchange for this sacrifice," Theseus asked, "what do you want?" Admiral Chun met his compound eyes without flinching. "Full membership in the Galactic Concord," she said, "with all associated rights and protections. Humanity takes its place among the stars as equals, not primitives." The chamber fell silent. The Velith sage spoke again, her voice soft but clear. "You would trade the lives of 12,000 warriors for a political seat." Chen's expression finally changed, and what appeared on her face was something the aliens had never seen before. Pride mixed with absolute certainty, with respect. "Elder, I am not trading lives," she said. "I am giving the Vecthory a fight they will never forget. And in 18 months, when we have broken their invasion, I expect that seat to be waiting." Theseus stared at the human admiral for a long moment. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of the predators his ancestors had once feared. Something ancient and hungry and utterly without mercy. "The council will deliberate," he said finally. The vote was close, but the motion passed. Humanity would have their chance to prove themselves. As the session ended, the Velith sage approached Colonel Webb. Her ancient form drifted silently through the air, stopping just in front of the scarred Marine. "Your soldiers," she asked quietly, "do they know they are unlikely to survive this mission?" Webb looked at her with something the sage had not seen in thousands of years, an emotion that seemed completely alien and terrifying at the same time. It was eagerness. "Ma'am," he said softly. "They volunteered." The sage stared at him for a long moment, then drifted away without another word. She had lived for millennia and had seen countless species rise and fall, but she had never encountered anything like humanity, and for the first time in her ancient existence, she was glad they were on her side. The Vecthory Armada arrived at Yalto 7 6 weeks later. and the sky turned black with their ships from the command bunker deep beneath the capital city. Colonel Webb watched the enemy descent on tactical displays. 2 million shock troops poured from massive dropships, their beetle-black carapaces gleaming in the light of the planet's twin suns. The Vectory were everything the intelligence reports had described: massive insectoid warriors standing 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor that could stop small arms fire, equipped with weapons that could tear through steel. They moved like a living tide, spreading across the plains outside the city with terrifying speed. "All units, this is Colonel Webb," he announced over the command frequency. "Weapons free. Make them pay for every step." The first day of battle lasted 18 hours. The Vectory advanced in waves, confident that their numbers would overwhelm the tiny human force. Instead, they walked into a nightmare of precision violence. Marine snipers fired from concealed positions kilometers away, each shot punching through Vectory skulls with perfect accuracy. Automated gun emplacements cut down entire squads before self-destructing to avoid capture. Mines buried beneath the streets erupted in chains of fire that consumed hundreds of enemy soldiers in seconds. By the time the sun set, 40,000 Vectory lay dead on the outskirts of the city. The enemy commanders regrouped and sent scouts ahead to map the human defenses. Most of the scouts never returned, and those who did brought reports of shadows that killed without warning, of buildings that collapsed on advancing troops, of human soldiers who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly on the second day. The Vectory breached the outer defensive line. It cost them 60,000 more soldiers. The Marines fell back according to plan, collapsing tunnels and destroying bridges as they retreated. Every building they abandoned was rigged with explosives. Every street was seeded with traps. The Vectory paid in blood for every block they captured. Private First Class Maria Santos held a 3-story building with just her fire team for 6 hours, accounting for over 200 confirmed kills before she ran out of ammunition and fell back to the next position. Staff Sergeant John Chun took a plasma round to the chest. Field dressed the wound himself and returned to his post within an hour. These were not exceptional acts. They were simply what Marines died in the third day. The Vectory commanders lost patience and ordered a full assault. They would bury the humans under sheer weight of numbers, crushing their resistance through overwhelming force. Colonel Webb had been waiting for this moment. The Marines fell back to the inner city, leading the enemy deeper into the urban maze. The Vectory surged forward, sensing victory, and found only death kill zones that had been carefully prepared for weeks activated in perfect sequence. Entire city blocks became furnaces of directed explosives. Overlapping fields of fire created walls of bullets that nothing could survive. The Vectory kept coming, and the Marines kept killing. By the 7th day, the enemy had captured 80% of the capital. Their casualties exceeded 400,000. They had not taken a single human prisoner. The remaining Marines consolidated in the central district, a cluster of reinforced buildings that had been turned into a final fortress. They were exhausted, low on ammunition, and many were wounded, but they showed no signs of surrender. Colonel Webb walked among his soldiers, offering words of encouragement and checking on the wounded. His left arm hung useless at his side, broken by shrapnel during a close-quarters engagement, but he refused evacuation. "How are you holding up, Gunny?" he asked Gunnery Sergeant Vasquez, who was busy reloading magazines in a makeshift bunker. Vasquez looked up with a tired grin. She had a bandage wrapped around her head and burn marks on her armor, but her eyes were still bright. "Running low on ammo, sir," she replied. "Might have to start throwing rocks soon." Webb smiled despite everything. "Just make sure you throw them hard." On the 9th day, the Concorde fleet arrived. 11 species had sent their warships, the largest combined force in Concorde history. They dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find the human force destroyed, the city fallen, the Vectory celebrating their victory, Instead, they found targeting data streaming up from the surface precise coordinates for every Vectory command post, every supply depot, every troop concentration. The Marines had been painting targets throughout the entire siege, building a complete picture of enemy positions. The orbital bombardment lasted 3 hours. Concord warships rained fire on the Vectory forces outside the city, guided by human forward observers who had been hiding in the ruins. Enemy formations that had taken days to assemble were annihilated in seconds on the 11th day. The Vectory retreated. Their invasion force had been shattered. Of the 2 million soldiers they had deployed, fewer than 800,000 survived to reach their dropships. Their command structure was in ruins, their supply lines destroyed. Their morale-broken commander Rethvan led the first Concorde shuttle to reach the human perimeter. He had demanded the honor. Still unable to believe what the data showed, what he found silenced him completely. Central District was a wasteland of rubble and scorched earth. Buildings had been reduced to skeletal frames. Streets were carpeted with Vectory corpses, and the smell of smoke and death hung heavy in the air. And standing in the middle of it all were the Marines' 4,200 soldiers still on their feet, covered in dirt and blood and exhaustion. Their armor was dented and scorched, their weapons worn from constant use. But they stood in formation as if they were on parade. Colonel Webb limped forward to greet the Scythery commander. His uniform was torn, his face was streaked with grime, and he looked like he had walked through the gates of hell itself. "Commander Rethvan," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "Apologies for the mess. We tried to leave some for you." Rethvan stared at the human for a long moment, his mandibles completely still. "The kill ratio?" he finally asked. "What was the final count?" Webb glanced at his tactical datapad, then looked back up with a slight smile. 71-1. The Scythery commander said nothing. There was nothing to say. 7,800 Marines had died defending Yalto 7, but they had taken over 550,000 Vectory with them. They had held a city against impossible odds for 11 days. And they had broken the back of the largest invasion force in Concorde history 1 year later. Admiral Chun took her seat on the Galactic Concorde War Council. The chamber was the same one where she had first presented her proposal, but everything had changed. The commanders who had once dismissed humanity as primitives now watched her with respect bordering on reverence. A bronze plaque hung beside her seat, bearing the names of every Marine who had fallen on Yalto 7. She touched it gently before sitting down, a silent promise to those who had given everything. The Vectory Dominion sued for peace 3 months later. Their leaders had seen the reports from Yalto 7, had calculated what would happen if humanity turned its full attention toward them, and decided that extinction was too high a price for conquest in the military academies of 16 species. A new doctrine was taught, studied, analyzed, and never quite replicated. They called it the human way of war, and it became required reading for every officer in the Concorde. The Velith sage visited Admiral Chun one final time before returning to her ancient homeworld. "I have lived for millennia," the sage said, her voice barely a whisper, "and I have seen countless species rise and fall. I have witnessed empires built and destroyed, wars fought and forgotten." She paused, her ancient eyes meeting Chen's. "But I have never seen anything like your people," she continued. "You are small and fragile and short-lived, and yet you fight like demons from the void itself. I do not understand how such a species came to exist." Admiral Chun smiled softly. "We evolved on a death world, Elder," she replied. "We learned very early that the universe does not care if we live or die. So we decided to make it care." The sage nodded slowly, then drifted away without another word and across the galaxy. The Vectory had learned a lesson that their empire would never forget humans are not prey. They never were.